Valentine's Day is coming up and it's got me thinking about something that I love, economics. Let me tell you about the 5 books that helped me fall in love with economics, and I'll share with you the most romantic economics book I know. Hi, I'm Craig and welcome to Market Power, where we look at the power of markets and economics to shape our world. I tell my students that learning economics is like learning a foreign language. To master it, you have to immerse yourself in it. One of the best ways to get to immersion is by reading economics books. I want to share with you 5 of the books that I read when I started in economics and how they helped me develop a love for the topic. And at the conclusion, I'm going to give you a bonus book that involves a very romantic story involving economists. I also encourage you to check in the comments where you can give your recommendations and see the recommendations that others have suggested. The first book is going to come as no surprise. It's Freakonomics. This is the first book on economics that I read. I took an AP economics class in high school and the teacher assigned us this book. And this was something that just opened me up to the topic. I had never even considered economics before, at least nothing more than what you hear about when they talk about GDP, the housing market, stocks, those kind of things. But when I read Freakonomics, it was like the economic tool set had been opened to me. I realized that economics applied to daycares, to real estate listings, to sumo wrestling. There were just so many topics I had never even considered were economics, and that book instantly clicked with me. The nice thing about Freakonomics is that it comes with a bonus recommendation, Super Freakonomics. Super Freakonomics came out when I was taking my first college economics class, and I knew I had to get it because I was just so interested in economics and I had already read Freakonomics. It was something that again was enjoyable and made me think deeper about what was happening in economics. Sometimes I'm hesitant about recommending these. Some of the content hasn't held up well over time, but there's still a lot of good, interesting things in there, and they really did help me get that interest in economics right at the very beginning, so I'd be remiss if I didn't mention them. My second recommendation is the Armchair Economist, which again, I read during that first college level economics class I took. This book really resonated with me, especially because there's a chapter in it about why does popcorn cost so much at the movies. Now you'll notice on my channel that I do a lot of videos on movies and economics, and that's because when I was in high school, I worked at a movie theater. I really enjoy movies, and I had that business model in my mind when I was taking these economics classes. So as I was reading this book, I was able to engage with the author and for the first time actually disagree with an author and say, I don't think your interpretation is correct. And it was that conversation that I had in my mind that really laid the groundwork for me believing that I could go on and do research, that I could actually go investigate questions and come up with hypotheses that people hadn't thought of before. So I have to give the Armchair Economist a high position in my recommendation list because it was instrumental in getting me towards that PhD path. My third recommendation is Nudge, and Nudge is appropriate for this Valentine season because I have a very sentimental attachment to Nudge. It's a fantastic book about behavioral economics, which is of course very popular right now, and it got me thinking again differently about what's going on in the world. But like I said, I have a little bit of a sentimental attachment to it, which is perfect for a video coming out around Valentine's Day. My wife and I celebrated our first Christmas just 2 months after we got married. Again, it was while I was in that first college economics class. She went to the bookstore knowing that I wanted a book on economics, but having no clue what to get. So she asked somebody there for a recommendation, they handed her the book, and she surprised me with it. I was so new to economics, I had never heard about this book. It's very popular today, most people recommend it, but I hadn't heard of it. And so there was my wife, my new wife, had gone to the bookstore to get me this book. Something that totally surprised me and something that has been very influential in my life. So I have a sentimental and maybe even irrational attachment to this book. My fourth recommendation is Moneyball. Again, that first college level economics class I took, I read this right at the very end, and I saw how economics was applying to something in the real world. Not just, supply and demand, but somebody thinking on the margin and trying to find out who were the underpriced players. I loved it. It was well written. Michael Lewis is an incredible journalist and he writes beautifully. So it comes across as a gripping narrative of Billy Beane and the A's trying to use economics to outplay their competition. My fifth recommendation is Poor Economics. Now this isn't quite a book that helped me fall in love with economics, but the author, Esther Duflo, did. Esther Duflo is this amazing economist who has done pioneering work in developing countries on evaluating policies that lift people out of poverty. Her work inspired me when I was an undergraduate, and I was eager to go out and do similar work in developing countries. Indeed, a lot of my research is in developing countries, and I can attribute at least part of that to Esther Duflo's inspirational work. This is a great recommendation for students or other people getting introduced to economics for the first time because it takes us out of the United States and it looks in a place in these developing countries where economics can really help us understand what's going on there. Well, those are my 5 recommendations. Freakonomics with Super Freakonomics, The Armchair Economist, Nudge, Moneyball, and Poor Economics. Now, if that list didn't include one of your favorites, please leave a comment so that way I can figure out what kind of books I should be recommending to students. I've put links to all of these books in the description, and I hope that you're interested in them. But before you go, let me tell you about what I think is the most romantic book in economics. My candidate for the most romantic book in economics is Two Lucky People by Milton Friedman and his wife Rose Friedman. Milton Friedman was one of the most influential economists of the 20th century, not only in the field of economics where he won a Nobel Prize, but also bringing economics to the people. Because Milton and Rose wrote this book together, they write it in their own voices, and it'll indicate whose voice is speaking at that time, giving us 2 views on a situation where you usually only get the one. There are tons of romantic stories in here, like when Milton and Rose go on their first date and Milton tries to land his first kiss. The story that has stuck with me is one that happened late in their marriage. They'd already been married about 30 years, and their daughter wrote them and said, "Hey, have you considered getting a divorce?" Which they said, was a shocking thing to hear from their daughter. And their daughter explained that there was a marriage penalty in the tax code. And Milton responded that, yes, we're economists, we care about saving money, but there are also other things that we care about. And so it was just so great to see that economics isn't the only thing ruling his thoughts. He was just known so well for being such a great economic thinker. And yet, that bond between him and his wife was something that he cared about more than saving a few dollars on his paycheck. Thanks for watching Market Power today. Again, if you have a book that wasn't in my list, please comment below. I would love to hear what you have to say. We'll see you next time.